All right, everybody, we're back again for episode 2 of our Macedonia Youth YouTube channel. We'll be doing our Bible studies this way for as long as we need to due to the COVID-19 virus that's going around. I've got a special guest with me today. This is another former student of mine named James Matthews. A lot of y'all know him, but some of y'all don't. James graduated from high school, and then he went to MacU. He has a bachelor's degree from MacU, so he knows the Bible very well, but he also has his bachelor's degree in nursing and is getting ready to pursue some graduate work in nursing. So James is a Christian, a good guy, but he's also in the medical field, so he's going to share some of his knowledge with us. Tonight, we're talking about, we're actually talking a little bit about COVID-19 and some things that are going on in our world. I know lots of y'all out there might be worried about this thing and scared and unsure. I mean, we all are to a little point. But James has some good knowledge he's going to share with us. And also the Bible has some good knowledge to share with us on the topic. If you don't know, in the Old Testament, God talks a lot about disease and infection and sickness and those sort of things. So we're going to look at some scriptures along those lines. But the main point for today is going to be that God wins in the end. No matter what happens in this world, no matter the bad things that happen, we know that if we have a relationship with Christ, if we've given our life to Him, that we're okay in the end. We don't have to fear the things of this world. James has a verse of scripture that he's going to read to you that talks a little bit about that.
So this scripture comes from John 16:33, and just a little bit of backstory about this passage. It comes in a time where the church was facing separation, where they were going to go kind of in their own direction, and everybody was really anxious and worried about what was to come in the future because they didn't know how they were going to do on their own, how they were going to handle it. So we look at John 16:33. It says, and this is Jesus speaking directly, it says, "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." So that's going to be kind of our focus for this one, is even with the uproar and kind of the uncertainty that follows in the future, that we already know the end goal. We already know God has overcome everything, and we can kind of keep our faith in that sense to get us through it. And that's one of the main things we got to do, is just hold faith and trust that God's going to get us through this, even with everything going on.
Yeah, I think those are some good thoughts to have, and I also want you guys to know that there are some really, really interesting verses in the Bible about this topic. Some things that maybe you've never even read before, some things that you've maybe never even heard about before. But if you'll stick with us, I know the book of Numbers and the book of Leviticus isn't usually something that teenagers are interested in reading. But if you'll stick with us, I think you'll really learn a lot, and it'll probably increase your faith that God's got this, that there's nothing that's going to happen in this world that we should be afraid of happening. So James is a nurse. James works in the ICU department at Vidant. Okay, so he sees a lot of stuff every single time he's on a shift. But if I was to ask you, James, as a medical professional, what is the best way that I could keep from getting COVID-19, what would you tell me to do?
So there's a lot of things that I would tell you to do. They say keep a distance from other individuals.
I know.
Don't go places with large crowds. Avoid touching your face, mucous membranes, so mouth, nose, etc. But since day one of nursing school, they say the best way to prevent the spread of disease is to wash your hands. And that holds true for this virus as well. They say you need to wash your hands, warm water, soap, and at least for 2 minutes, so roughly sing happy birthday in your head twice. Really scrub in between your fingers, in between your fingernails, and that's always been the go-to to stop spread disease.
Okay, so it's something very simple, right, that we should be doing anyway. I hope y'all wash your hands on a daily basis, multiple times a day. But y'all probably didn't know this, but washing your hands is also biblical. All right, and I'm going to show you that today as we look at our scriptures. So, all right, so let's take a look at our scripture for today. Our scripture for today comes from a book of the Bible that you probably don't read from much. It's the book of Numbers, okay? And like I said earlier, if you'll stick with us, I think you'll learn a whole lot, some amazing things in here. So we're going to turn to Numbers chapter 19, and we're going to read from verses 6 through 8. And what's going on here is God is giving the Israelite people some rules about hygiene, about how to stay clean, about how not to catch diseases that could have wiped out their entire population because they're traveling together, they're right on top of each other all the time, they're staying in tents together. It's a perfect environment for a disease to spread and possibly just wipe out this whole people group. So God is kind of helping them out with that. They don't even know that germs exist at this point in history. They don't even know that disease can be transferred from person to person. So God is really hitting them with some stuff that they're not even aware of. And God gives them this recipe to basically make soap. Okay? Numbers chapter 19, 3,000 years before we even knew that germs existed, God is giving the Israelites a recipe to make soap. And it's pretty amazing stuff. So let's read this. Numbers 19, 6 through 8 says this. The priest is to take some cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet wool, and throw them onto the burning heifer. All right, let's stop there for a second. Okay, the burning heifer. Yes, that is referring to a cow. Okay, so part of this recipe is that they were supposed to burn a cow down to basically what was left over, which would be the animal fats inside of it. Okay, and if you look at the recipe for soap today, if you're making like a homemade soap, animal fat is one of the recipes for a homemade soap. So let's go back, read this again. It's pretty amazing. Verse 6 says, the priest is to take some cedar wood, some hyssop, some scarlet wool, and throw them onto the burning heifer. After that, the priest must wash his clothes and bathe himself with water. He may then come into the camp, but he will be ceremonially unclean till evening. The man who burns it must also wash his clothes and bathe it with water, and he too will be unclean till evening. Okay, so we have this recipe. We have animal fat. Okay, God says that you also need to throw some cedar wood, some burnt cedar wood, so the ashes of cedar wood. And we know from research that burnt ashes, are also a very good cleansing agent. Okay, it's something that will clean your skin. So we got the animal fats, we've got the burnt ashes, hyssop. Me and James had to look that up because we weren't familiar with that. Hyssop is actually a plant that has a good smell to it. Okay, so any soap that you use, I know you're at Walmart smelling the different body washes and soap. It's kind of like that, all right? When you wash yourself, you also want to smell clean. Okay, so God gives them a scent to put in there. And then this is the one that kind of really did confuse us. It was the scarlet wool. Why would God want them to put wool in this recipe? And the research that we did said that the wool would be kind of abrasive, it would be kind of rough, and it would stick to their hands in this recipe, and it would cause them to really have to rub their hands together, which is exactly what doctors today will tell you. You know, if you're washing your hands, don't do a short little job. You really need to rub. You need to take your time doing it. And here we are 3,000 years before germs are even discovered. And God is telling the Israelites how to make soap and how to wash themselves clean of disease because they were his people. He wanted to protect them. He wanted them to last. And that's pretty amazing to me. But let's skip down to Numbers 19:11. And God also talks about some specific things that the Israelites were not supposed to do. And these are the verses that you read on the surface and you're like, why in the world is God talking about this? Okay. But as you research it, you really understand everything, all these laws are to protect his people from disease and things that would harm them. So Numbers 19:11, it gives one of these things the Israelites could not do. It says, whoever touches a human corpse will be unclean for 7 days. They must purify themselves with the water, that's talking about the mixture that they've already made, on the 3rd day and on the 7th day. Then they will be clean. But if they do not purify themselves on the 3rd and 7th day, they will not be clean. Okay, earlier in the video I asked James, what are the things that you recommend for me to not get sick during this COVID-19 outbreak? And he said, you need to remove yourself from groups of people, and you need to wash your hands and cleanse yourself. Okay, so isn't it amazing that 3,000 years before germs even existed, that God is telling people, if you touch something dead that you can get sick from, then you are to remove yourself from the group, wash yourself on the third day, wash yourself on the seventh day, and then you can come back in. The exact same recommendation that a doctor would give you in 2020. To me, that just blows my mind, the wisdom of God. The Israelites had no clue why they had to do these things, okay, but God knew exactly why. So this time right now is a huge time of uncertainty, where people are nervous and scared. But what do you think is something we should leave the people with today?
The biggest thing I take from it is, with all this new information coming out about the virus and how contagious it is, there's a lot of fear going around, especially in the hospitals. Nurses are scared, doctors are scared, the community is scared, and there's always this kind of fear of the unknown. What will happen to me if I get this virus? What will happen if my family gets this virus? But the positive we can take from this as Christians is we already know the outcome. God's wisdom is so much superior than ours, in the sense that what bothers us, He's already come up with a solution for. So we've read how worrying doesn't help us, anxiety doesn't add on to our life. So the best thing we can do is just trust that everything will go according to plan. And that's not to say don't protect yourself.
Right.
Do the
basic things.
Do the basic things. Wash your hands, cough into your elbow, stay away from big crowds. But in the end, God has already sorted everything out. We just need to put our faith in Him.
All right. And let me get personal for a second, James. Has there ever been a time in your life where you were really uncertain about the future, you were scared, and you weren't sure that God could bring you through it?
So one of the biggest things in my life is I grew up on the farm. I just knew my whole life I was going to be a farmer. I was going to go to college, get a degree, come back, work on the farm with my father. My father wound up having a pretty massive stroke when I was 17 years old. So it left my family in a position where me and my brother had to kind of take over the family business. And being a 17-year-old kid, I really didn't know what the real world was about. I didn't know how to handle something that large. And it came during a time in my life that I was on fire for the Lord. Like, I was going to church, I was going on mission trips, I was praying. You're the one that baptized me.
Right.
I mean, I was doing everything I could to live a Christian life, and then that happened, and I kind of looked like, why me? I go to church, I do all the things, and that brought upon a low time where I thought, God forgot about us.
Right.
And it's really hard during those times to think, man, there's a bright side. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's just hard to believe that you're ever going to come out of that place. But fast forward, that experience is the reason I went to Bible college, is the reason I actually pursued God more. Because once that happened, I didn't know what to do with my life. So I said, come and talk to you, and you kind of mentioned Bible college. So I ended up there, and because of Bible college, I had an advisor that suggested nursing.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried it thinking, let's just see what it's like.
Right.
Fell in love with it, and now I get to work in an environment with people at their lowest who don't think they're going to get out of the hospital, or have a loved one they don't think is going to do well, and I can talk and pray and speak with them as well. So everything kind of comes full circle, and it gets better. slowly but surely
Right.
gets
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, and I remember James during some of those down times, and probably looking back, you think, hey, that's just the way life is. It's up and down. It's up and down. But when you're right in the middle of it, it feels like it's just down, and the down's lasting for a while. But just believe and trust. Like he said, it's gonna get better. It may be a tough time in our country and our world right now, but it's going to get better. God's going to get us through this. And this is also a good time to reach out to people in His name and to share Christ with people, because there's lots of people out there looking for answers. There's lots of people out there questioning life. There's lots of people out there wondering what the future is going to hold. And that's an awesome open door for us as Christians, I think, to share the gospel with people. So the main point tonight is we just want to encourage you. God's dealt with disease before and brought His people through it. He'll do it again. And in the meantime, we just need to focus on Him, share His message with people, and do the best job that we can to live the way that He wants us to live. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you would like to study more about this topic, there's a great video on YouTube called Scientific Foreknowledge of Germs and Disease. It gives the Christian perspective on some other things that God did in the Old Testament to protect the Israelites from disease. It's some really good information, and I will put a link to that YouTube video down below in the comments. So please check that out, and hope to see you next time. Bye.